Hello guys, welcome to Royal Insider. 3 children, 3 times. Perfect compliance. That's how many chances Prince Harry had to watch his brother do the one thing a working royal is literally born knowing how to do. File the documentation that puts your child's birth on official record with medical witnesses with transparency with the paperwork done right. George announced same day. Name confirmed 3 days later. Charlotte, same process. Louis, birth certificate registered 8 days after birth. William even had a Westminster City Council registrar travel to Kensington Palace to make it easy on him. Signed and done. And then it was Harry's turn. Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was born at 5:26 in the morning on the 6th of May, 2019. The palace told the public that Meghan had gone into labor in the early hours of the morning, which sounds like it's just starting, right? Like it's happening now. It wasn't. By the time that announcement landed, the baby had already been alive for hours, not minutes, hours. The birth certificate held back for 11 days. The location not confirmed until the certificate was released weeks after the birth. And unlike every single royal birth before his, going back decades, the official bulletin carried no signatures from the mother's doctors. None. Not a small detail. A deliberate deviation from a protocol Harry had watched his own brother follow 3 times in 5 years. And here's the thing. By the time we get to the Heritage Foundation court case and what a U.S. federal judge privately read in a sealed filing, you'll understand why this isn't just about a birth announcement. It's about a man who spent 6 years positioning himself as the victim of a system while quietly refusing to follow its most basic rules. The mainstream media won't say this out loud. So, here it is. Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain. Look, here's the thing about Prince Harry that his Netflix deals and carefully curated Montecito lifestyle have successfully obscured for the last 5 years. He's not a rebel. He's not brave. He's not a whistleblower. He's a man who benefited from every single privilege that the British monarchy provides. The title, the security, the global access, the instant credibility, and then at the precise moment those privileges required accountability in return, decided that the rules were optional for him. And that worked for a while. In 2019, the press largely accepted the "we want privacy" narrative when Archie was born without the usual hospital steps photo call. Fair enough. Understandable even. But privacy and transparency, 2 different things. You can have privacy and still file your paperwork. You can protect your child's image and still let a doctor sign a form confirming the birth. William and Kate managed it 3 times. What Harry and Meghan asked for wasn't privacy, it was exemption. And in 2026, that exemption's running out. Because the Heritage Foundation's lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, which is now delayed until June 12th of this year, isn't about politics. It's about a pattern. A man who wrote openly in his published memoir about using cocaine, cannabis, magic mushrooms, and ayahuasca, then applied to live and work in the United States, then refused to allow the public to know what he told immigration officials on his application. Think about that. Tom Bower's new book, Betrayal, published in March 2026, documents that Harry changed his phone number without telling a single member of his family. Camilla, according to Bower's sources, privately told a friend, "Meghan's brainwashed Harry." Whether you accept that framing or not, and I'd argue the evidence supports it, what you can't argue with is this. A man who demands institutional transparency from the palace, from the press, from the government, has spent 6 years refusing to be transparent about the most basic facts of his own life. That contradiction, it's catching up with him legally, financially, constitutionally. The evidence, the 8-hour lie they called privacy. On the morning of the 6th of May 2019, Archie Harrison was born at 5:26 a.m. at Portland Hospital in London. Got it. 5:26 a.m. By the afternoon of that same day, Buckingham Palace released a statement confirming that Meghan had gone into labor in the early hours of the morning. Phrased to suggest an ongoing birth, active, in progress, the kind of statement you'd release if the baby hadn't arrived yet. The baby had arrived 8 hours earlier. Now, Harry's team will tell you and has told you repeatedly that this was about privacy, about doing things differently, about not playing the royal game. Except here's the thing. Privacy doesn't require deception. Privacy is we're not doing the hospital steps photo. Privacy is not we're going to let the entire planet believe our child hadn't been born yet for 8 hours. That's not privacy. That's a managed release. That's controlling a narrative. Those are two completely different things. And Harry spent 6 years pretending they're the same. William didn't issue a misleading statement about Kate's labor timeline with any of his 3 children. The announcements were prompt, accurate, immediate. Because when you're 7th in line to the British throne, accuracy and birth documentation isn't a lifestyle choice. It's a constitutional obligation. I know what you're thinking. Maybe they just wanted space. Maybe they panicked. Maybe the palace pushed the statement out too early. Nope. This announcement came from their team, their spokesperson, their timeline. They chose that wording. They chose to let the world believe labor was just starting when their son had been alive since sunrise. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy. The missing signatures and why they matter. This is the detail that should have been front-page news in 2019. It wasn't. So, let's put it on record now. For every major royal birth in living memory, the official birth bulletin, the formal announcement issued through the palace, has included signatures from the attending medical professionals. It's not decorative. It's verification. It's the constitutional equivalent of saying this birth happened at this time in this location, a statement that read, for reasons of patient confidentiality, we're unable to provide any comment or information, which is entirely understandable, except it means the medical professionals who were in that room are legally prevented from confirming or correcting anything. Harry had seen this process 3 times. George signed verified medical witness. Charlotte signed verified medical witness. Louis signed verified medical witness. Music. Archie nothing. Here's the analogy that makes this land. Imagine you work at a law firm. You watch 3 of your colleagues file case documents correctly in front of a notary with signatures on time every single time. Then when it's your turn to file the exact same document, you hand in an unsigned version a week and a half late and say, I just wanted to do it differently. What happens? You get fired because you knew the process. You watched the process. You chose not to follow the process. That's not rebellion. That's entitlement with a Netflix deal attached. The 11-day certificate and the location cover-up. 4 weeks after Archie's birth, the public didn't know where he'd been born. Weeks. There'd been months of speculation about a possible home birth at Frogmore Cottage. Reporters camped outside. The palace said nothing. Harry's team said nothing. And then 11 days after the birth, a birth certificate was released confirming that Archie had been born at Portland Hospital in central London. Not at home, not at Windsor, at a private hospital in Westminster that charges upwards of $19,000 for a basic delivery. So the man who left the royal family, citing the suffocating pressures of an institution obsessed with image, gave birth at a 5-star private hospital, withheld the location for weeks to maximize the mystery, released the paperwork on his own timeline, and then accepted a Netflix deal to tell the story his way on camera in his own words. With no external verification required. 11 days. William managed 8. And that 8 wasn't stretched to the limit. It was 8 days because he chose to be transparent quickly, not because he was legally forced to. And here's where it gets worse. If the birth documentation discrepancies were a one-time thing, maybe I'd let it go. People do things differently. Fine. But it's not one time. It's a pattern. And that pattern connects directly to a U.S. federal courtroom where a judge has privately read Prince Harry's visa records that Harry himself refuses to make public, and where the next hearing isn't until June 12th of this year. If you think the documentation gap on Archie's birth certificate is bad, wait until we get to what Harry told U.S. immigration officials about his drug use, or more precisely, what he apparently didn't tell them. The William Standard and what it proves. Let's be clinical about this for a second. Prince William was briefed on the succession to the Crown Act when it passed in 2013. He was an active working royal, watching his father prepare to become king, watching the machinery of constitutional monarchy operate at close range. He understood because he'd been trained from birth to understand that documentation of royal births isn't bureaucratic theater. It's legal record. It sits in Privy Council books. It verifies succession. It matters. George was born July 22, 2013. Name officially confirmed 3 days later. Birth certificate signed. Witnessed public. Charlotte, born May 2, 2015. Same process. No gaps, no delays, no mystery. Lewis, born April 23, 2018. Certificate registered 8 days later. William signed it at Kensington Palace with a registrar present as witness. Harry watched all 3 of these unfold from inside the institution. And then in May 2019, having watched the process 3 times with full knowledge of what was required, Harry and Meghan announced a birth 8 hours after it happened with no medical signatures, with the location deliberately withheld, and released a certificate 11 days later. So, there are only 2 possible explanations for this. Either Harry forgot everything he'd witnessed 3 times at close range, which would be extraordinary, frankly, or Harry decided consciously that those rules were for William and not for him. I'll let you decide which is more insulting. The HR title on a form he said he gave up. Here's the one they hoped nobody would notice. They were wrong. When Elizabeth Diana was born in June 2021, her birth certificate, a public document in the state of California, was obtained and published. It listed Harry's title as the Duke of Sussex, followed by HR. Wait, what? This is the same man who made a globally reported, heavily publicized decision to step back from using his HR title. The same man who in interview after interview positioned himself as someone walking away from the trappings of royal status. The same man who told the world that titles and hierarchy were part of the problem. And yet, on an official government document in the country where he now lives, the title HR appears in writing under his own name with his own knowledge. How's that work? His team's explanation: legal documents require official names, which is technically accurate, but it's also a very convenient answer from a man who spent 3 years telling the public he didn't want to be defined by those exact letters. Look, you can't spend 3 years presenting yourself as a man who rejected royal privilege and then quietly invoke that privilege on every official document that matters. That's not authenticity. That's brand management. And the brand's starting to crack. The human cost. I want to stop here for a second, because behind all of this, the legal filings, the birth certificate timelines, the missing signatures, there are real people who got erased so that this particular story could be told in this particular way. Real people. Think about the medical staff at Portland Hospital. The doctors and nurses who were in that room on the morning of May 6, 2019. The professionals who carried out their jobs to the highest standard, who are bound by patient confidentiality, who cannot speak, not to confirm, not to clarify, not to correct anything about what they witnessed. Their professional verification was deemed unnecessary. Their signatures, which every previous royal birth had included as a matter of constitutional record, were removed from the process entirely. And now, if questions arise about that morning, those medical professionals are legally prevented from answering them. That silence doesn't protect them. It protects Harry. Then there's Sintable, the charity Harry co-founded for vulnerable children in Lotu and Botswana, children living with HIV, the charity that, according to Tom Bauer's documentation, lost 23% of its annual funding after sponsors including Audi withdrew their support due to the controversy surrounding Harry's media ventures. The charity that lost its London office. The charity that restructured under crisis conditions. The charity from which Harry, Prince Sisso, and the trustees all stepped down in March 2025. All of them. Those children aren't part of the Netflix narrative. They don't appear in the carefully curated Instagram posts. There's no Archwell Foundation press release about what happened to Sentable's funding. Just silence. And for the veterans of the Invictus Games, the people this man says are closest to his heart, the community he built his post-royal identity around, even they weren't spared. Tom Bauer's betrayal quotes an observer at the 2024 Games, describing it as the Meghan Games, with media coverage so dominated by the couple's presence and styling choices that the athletes themselves became a backdrop. A backdrop. Dominic Reed of the Invictus Foundation put it plainly: media coverage prioritized the couple rather than the competitors themselves. These aren't small collateral damages. These are the direct documentable consequences of a man who decided his personal narrative was more important than every institution and every community he claimed to represent. That's not victimhood. That's a very specific kind of selfishness dressed in the language of liberation. Now, let's talk about what actually happens next. Not in theory, in practice. Music, in 2026, The Heritage Foundation's lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security has been running since 2023. The core allegation is straightforward. Prince Harry publicly admitted in his memoir Spare to using cocaine, cannabis, magic mushrooms, and ayahuasca. Standard U.S. visa applications require applicants to answer the question, have you ever violated or engaged in a conspiracy to violate any law relating to controlled substances? Harry publicly admitted to doing exactly that, multiple times in print, for which he received a reported advance of $20 million. Heritage Foundation Chief Counsel Kyle Brosman put it simply. Prince Harry repeatedly admitted to using illegal drugs in his memoir. This fact alone makes him inadmissible into the United States. So, there are two possible scenarios here. Either Harry answered that visa question truthfully, in which case DHS granted entry to someone who openly admitted to drug offenses, which would suggest he received treatment unavailable to ordinary applicants. Or Harry did not answer truthfully, in which case he made a material misrepresentation on a federal immigration document. Those are the only two options. His own legal team knows it. DHS knows it. The federal judge who privately reviewed those sealed records knows it. The case has been delayed until June 12, 2026. Procedurally delayed. The government cited purely bureaucratic factors for missing its own March deadline. Right. Meanwhile, a court filing noted that releasing Harry's immigration records would reveal, quote, the types of documents that Prince Harry used to travel to the United States, his admission status, and any immigration or non-immigration benefits that he may have sought. Benefits he may have sought. That phrase is doing a lot of work. In immigration law, benefits means things like special visa categories. There's an ordinary 01 visa for people with extraordinary ability, which requires a sponsor and a full background review. And then there's an A1 visa which is reserved for royals and heads of government, and which can bypass certain standard background checks. Bypass. Heritage Foundation argued specifically that an A1 visa could have allowed Harry to sidestep the exact questions about drug use that would have caught him out. The title he told the world he rejected. The letters HR he said he gave up. Potentially the same privilege that got him into America without answering for what he wrote in his own book. Interesting. Now, let's connect this to the birth documentation. The Act of Settlement 1701, the foundational law governing royal succession, requires that heirs to the British throne be documented as the legitimate biological children of their parents. The phrase used is heirs of the body. That's not poetry. That's a legal standard. Medical signatures on birth documentation exist precisely to provide contemporaneous professional verification of that standard. Without those signatures, you've got a gap in the constitutional record. William filled that gap for George, for Charlotte, for Louis. Harry left it open twice. When William becomes king. And constitutional experts, including royal commentators writing in Woman and Home in May 2026, have noted that King William is very keen on the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy. He'll have both the president and the legal standing to question the succession status of children whose documentation falls short of the standards applied to his own. Harry gave him that opening. Deliberately or not, he handed his brother a constitutional lever. Here's what we actually know. Prince Harry is a man who was trained from birth in the specific responsibilities that accompany royal status. He watched his brother file paperwork correctly 3 times for 3 children. He knew what the protocol required. He chose something different. He's a man who publicly rejected his royal title while listing HR on official government documents in a foreign country. Who demanded privacy while licensing his family's image to one of the world's largest streaming platforms. Who built his post-royal identity on the foundation of the very institution he claimed was destroying him, and who now depends on the ongoing drama of that separation to remain commercially relevant. He's a man who admitted in print to drug offenses for $20 million and then refused to allow the public to know what he told the U.S. government about those same offenses on a federal immigration form. He's a man whose charity for vulnerable children lost nearly a quarter of its funding and eventually collapsed while he was busy producing content about himself. Tom Bower's sources inside the palace describe Harry as increasingly detached, increasingly online, increasingly pulled into the noise he claimed to be escaping. Queen Camilla, according to Betrayal, privately told a friend that Meghan had brainwashed him. Whether that's fair or not, what is inarguable is this. The man who left to find peace is surrounded by more chaos, more legal exposure, and more institutional threat than at any point in his life inside the palace. The irony. The Heritage Foundation hearing is June 12, 2026. The title review by a future King William. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The birth documentation gaps are now part of the public record, documented, sourced, and sitting in the constitutional history of the House of Windsor. Harry had 3 chances to watch his brother show him how to do this properly. He didn't take a single one of them. And now the bill's arriving. Not in the form of a bad press cycle. Not in the form of a scathing book, though Prince Harry is a man who was trained from birth in the specific responsibilities that accompany royal status. He watched his brother file paperwork correctly 3 times for 3 children. He knew what the protocol required. He chose something different. He's a man who publicly rejected his royal title while listing HR on official government documents in a foreign country. Who demanded privacy while licensing his family's image to one of the world's largest streaming platforms. Who built his post-royal identity on the foundation of the very institution he claimed was destroying him, and who now depends on the ongoing drama of that separation to remain commercially relevant. He's a man who admitted in print to drug offenses for $20 million and then refused to allow the public to know what he told the U.S. government about those same offenses on a federal immigration form. He's a man whose charity for vulnerable children lost nearly a quarter of its funding and eventually collapsed while he was busy producing content about himself. Tom Bower's sources inside the palace describe Harry as increasingly detached, increasingly online, increasingly pulled into the noise he claimed to be escaping. Queen Camilla, according to Betrayal, privately told a friend that Meghan had brainwashed him. Whether that's fair or not, what is inarguable is this. The man who left to find peace is surrounded by more chaos, more legal exposure, and more institutional threat than at any point in his life inside the palace. The irony. The Heritage Foundation hearing is June 12, 2026. The title review by a future King William. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The birth documentation gaps are now part of the public record, documented, sourced, and sitting in the constitutional history of the House of Windsor. Harry had 3 chances to watch his brother show him how to do this properly. He didn't take a single one of them. And now the bill's arriving. Not in the form of a bad press cycle. Not in the form of a scathing book, though Tom Bowers certainly provided one. In the form of a federal court case he can't control, immigration records he won't release, documentation gaps he can't close, and a future king who is watching everything, saying nothing, and keeping score. So, here's the question I want you to sit with, not a rhetorical one, a genuine one. If the visa records are eventually made public, and based on the Heritage Foundation's escalating legal pressure, that day is coming, and those records show that Harry either lied on his application or received a visa category that allowed him to bypass the drug disclosure questions entirely. What does that do to every single claim he's ever made about honesty, about transparency, about being the one person in that family willing to tell the truth? Because you can't be the man of integrity who said the quiet part loud in a $20 million memoir, and also be the man who quietly invoked royal privilege on his immigration form to avoid answering for exactly what he wrote in that memoir. Those 2 men cannot coexist. Leave your answer below because I genuinely don't think his team has. Thanks for watching and subscribe my channel.